welcome to another edition of Around the Coin. My name is Faisal Khan. Thank you for joining us. Today with me, my guest, Abdul Haseeb Basit from Innovate Finance, UK. Hi Abdul, nice to have you here. How are you?
Hi Faisal, thanks for having me on the show. I'm great, thank you.
Okay, just for the people who don't know who you are, Abdul Haseeb Basit, you're one of the co-founders, if I take it correctly, of Innovate Finance.
That's correct.
And can you tell a little bit about what Innovate Finance is all about?
So Innovate Finance is an independent, not-for-profit membership association based in the UK that represents the fintech sector. We have over 300 members that range all the way from large financial institutions like Goldman Sachs, Citi, Barclays, HSBC, all the way down to the startups that you've yet to hear about that are applying their trade in co-working spaces around the world, and you'll be hearing about very soon, and fintechs of various stages of growth in between.
Is this the only agency in the US, like in the UK, the trade body, or are there others?
We're the only UK trade body that's dedicated to fintech. There are others. There are other trade bodies for financial services in the UK, and there are other fintech associations around the world. But we were the first fintech association anywhere in the world.
So tell me a little bit about your background. How did you get started in this thing? I mean, how does a young guy like you end up, co-founding a very powerful, a very influential trade body in the UK?
So my background is that I started my career in media during the dot-com boom, and I was working for a B2B publisher that was taking most of their portfolio online, and that for me was a really good grounding in the impact that digital can have on an industry and a business. Whilst I was there, I qualified as an accountant, and after that I moved into financial services. I worked for a decade in financial services, in traditional financial services, mainly for a large Swiss bank. And there again, the focus was very much on technology, so really working in technology transformation and strategy for the bank. And in doing so, I became more familiar with fintech as it was becoming more prevalent, and decided that I wanted to work in fintech. And it was just fortuitous that Innovate Finance was launching at the time when I was thinking about leaving traditional financial services, and I came on board as one of the first of the team and helped build the business.
So when you say Innovate Finance was being formed at the time, how did that, what was that genesis moment? Can you tell us who started it and why?
Yeah, absolutely. So the idea for Innovate Finance really came off the back of a government consultation in the UK. The government realised that the UK, and specifically London, had a lead position in fintech, which had developed quite organically. And they wanted to understand how best to promote that and to enhance that. So really, in hosting a number of roundtables with the fintech community and the banking community, one of the key threads that came out was that there's the need for an association, a representative body for the sector in the UK that can work for the benefit of the members. And so whilst the government championed this, Innovate Finance was being launched as an independent entity by a consultancy. And that's the point on which I came on board to help build the business.
Give me an example. I mean, I understand what a trade body does. It does a lot of work in legislation, does a lot of work in lobbying, does a lot of meet and greet, some industry seminars. I got to know you, I guess we met through Twitter, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's correct.
And you extended an invitation for what I now call one of the premier events in the UK for fintech, which is your Innovate Finance conference that happens in, when is it happening now? In March, I guess, 2018?
Yes, the next one is in March 19th and 20th, 2018.
So folks, if you're listening to this, 19th and 20th, 2018, this has been dubbed in many ways the Oscars of the fintech in the UK. So it's a hard ticket to get, but a must-attend event. But what exactly are you doing for your members? So I become a member, I pay some fees. What exactly are you doing? Are you lobbying for me? Are you making it easier for me to network? Can you just amplify on something like that?
So we describe what we do as three main things for our members. So there is the core function of the organisation, which is regulatory and policy lobbying, or advocacy, as we like to call it, which is making sure that policy changes, regulatory changes that are being enacted in the UK are fit for purpose for fintechs. And that ranges from the large banks to smaller organisations as well. We work very closely with the government, with the Treasury, with the FCA here in the UK, and the Bank of England. We also do a number of programs. You've described our flagship program, the Innovate Finance Global Summit, which is happening in March in 2018 for the next time. That attracts about 2,000 people globally to the UK to understand what's happening in UK Fintech. But also it's a chance for the UK to connect with the global community in Fintech as well. We also host a number of programs throughout the year focused on getting our members to work more collaboratively together to enhance Fintech. So that's large incumbents working with small startups in various formats. That could be through working groups, through design curated programs on specific themes and in specific formats. And also we run programs that are designed to help startups to scale on their journey as they become more international and larger companies.
So it is beneficial for a fintech startup in the UK to get engaged with your trade body, correct?
Absolutely. We're here to serve our members. And the final thing we do for our members, the third thing we do is promotion. So that's just not just promotion for the sector, but promotion for individual companies as well, to really get their brand out there and for them to establish their presence in the fintech space.
Okay. Abdul, it's also, it's my understanding that you are somewhat of a specialist when it comes to Islamic financing. Can you elaborate on that as well?
Yeah, I first came across Islamic finance when I was working in the traditional banking sector, and it was around the time when a number of Islamic banks in the UK were becoming authorized and launching, and really became interested in the space and started reading around the subject. And that led me to, through my MBA, which I was doing at the time, do my dissertation on Islamic finance and investment within the Islamic finance space. So that's an area I've been hugely interested in and I've followed ever since. So not having formally worked in the Islamic finance space, but I do have a good understanding of the sector and how it's evolving.
And you're still involved in that vertical today or not?
Absolutely. I think Islamic finance has really started to take notice of fintech and what's happening and the transformative power of fintech and how that might evolve the sector going forward. We in the UK are starting to see a number of Islamic finance fintechs emerge as well. We've had the first Islamic finance fintech anywhere in the world that's been authorized by a regulator here in the UK, which is Yield as a crowdfunding platform. And they've also taken a very innovative approach to their Sharia compliance as well, which is how interesting because that's an interesting development for how the sector is evolving.
Very cool. I can't help but notice, and the reason I had to bring you on this show is there was an article that came out not too many days ago, I believe 25th of July. It was out in New York Times. It really startled me because having read about all what's happening with Britain and Brexit, this article actually has a headline saying investment in UK fintech tops pre-Brexit levels in first half of 2017. And I was reading through the first paragraph, and your name, your organization's name came up, and obviously you've been quoted in their article a lot. It's almost like a misnomer here. I mean, we think about Brexit and we think about declining activity in the fintech. Here we see inclined activity in fintech investments. So, Mike's all yours. Tell us why this is happening. Is Brexit going to happen or not? Well, that's a greater question, but at least let's speak on this investment part because I believe you guys compiled the numbers. Innovate Finance compiled the numbers for the investments.
Yes, we do. So this is the fourth time we've done the VC investment landscape, which looks at the global VC investment in fintech. We do this at a frequency of every 6 months at least. And really, it's important for two reasons for us. Firstly, it's to understand the trends. Where's the investment going in fintech? What does that mean for signals of maturity of certain verticals within fintech? And more importantly, where's the investment coming from? And really, for our members, it's important because it's important to understand what investors are interested in, which verticals they're focused on, and where the sources of capital might be available to help scale their own businesses as well. So it's very important from that aspect. And what we've seen is that globally, in the first half of 2017, there were 778 deals, which attracted $6.5 billion of VC investment. And year on year, for the first half of the year, that's a 45% decrease globally. And these figures coming from PitchBook, which we think is a very reliable source for VC investment data. In the UK, we see that we attracted 564 million of VC investment, and that's actually a 37% increase year on year for the first half of the year. And so that's where the headline's coming from in terms of the increase to pre-Brexit levels. Now, in 2016, we did see a decline post-Brexit, where a number of deals that were planned were held due to the uncertainty around the referendum result. And by the end of Q4, we were starting to see a recovery. So this very much is a continued recovery to pre-Brexit levels. Now, having said that, we're not quite reaching the heights that we did in 2015 in the UK, which was a bumper year for UK VC fintech investment, where we topped $1.3 billion. And it looks like we may not achieve that again this year.
And where does London now stand vis-a-vis, let's say, Paris or Frankfurt and the other places, Amsterdam, as far as VC funding is concerned?
So generally, when you talk about tech VC, London is a standout European capital for tech investment. Still, and for fintech even more so. The others are starting to catch up slowly, but I think in having spoken to the VC community, which we do quite regularly, they feel that the fundamentals for UK fintech are very strong. So we have a very strong financial services sector here, which naturally lends itself well to demand for fintech services. We have great technology companies in the UK, and we have a great talent pool. And sitting alongside that, we have a very proactive regulator in the FCA. So you combine those factors, and the UK is still a very attractive investment for VCs.
But for how long? That's the question, right? I mean, do you think, I'm sure your clients, your members are not going to be complacent and make a unilateral decision that no, nothing is going to happen, Brexit is not really going to take place, etc. Surely they must be thinking about ways of porting themselves or passporting themselves into the greater EU if Brexit were to happen and if they feel they would be left out. What's your comment on that?
So absolutely, I don't think anyone's under any illusions that Brexit will happen in some form. There's certainly a lot of uncertainty around how it will unfold, and as more certainty or as more certain plans come to light, I think that will certainly help companies develop their plans. However, I think you're absolutely right. Nobody's waiting to see what happens before they make their plans. So, having looked at our membership, about 20% of them do benefit from EU passporting, and those companies are starting to make their plans to remain within the European Union or to remain with a base in the European Union. Does that necessarily mean that anyone would up sticks from the UK and move their entire operation? I don't think that's the case. That's not something we've heard from our membership. But certainly opening a second office somewhere in Europe is an option that a number of companies are exploring. And then beyond that, I think most UK companies have an ambition to scale anyway outside of the UK. The UK is a great market to build and prove your technology and scale it globally. So I don't think those plans necessarily change. The US, Europe, Asia are still the most attractive markets that UK companies focus on.
But is UK still some does it really hold a pedestal on the mantle?
In what sense?
In the sense that, okay, if you're starting up new, let's go to London. Let's not even look at Amsterdam. Let's not look at Singapore. Let's not look at, San Francisco or New York. Let's look at London. Is London going to be relevant?
I think so. I think certainly if you're launching a fintech business, we certainly have the infrastructure and possibly the best talent pool to draw upon in order to build your business. I think the important factor here is how well we can sustain that through Brexit, and that really will be the determining factor on how successful London remains. So we're very focused on supporting talent within the UK and the ability to draw talent from anywhere in the world for the areas which we need especially for the fintech sector.
But how does it play out in the immigration scheme of things? I mean, Brexit did sort of, touch a raw nerve, which was immigration. And now you're saying that the talent pool is there. Most of the talent pool in the UK comes from abroad.
Well,
it's not homegrown.
Well, having looked at our membership, about 30% of our founders are non-UK nationals of our fintech companies in our membership, and about 40% of their staff base is non-UK nationals as well. So it's a sizable amount, and it's something that we need to maintain. We're working quite closely with the government on really developing how that talent might be maintained within the UK post-Brexit. Certainly there are more signals coming from the government now as to what right EU nationals will have post-Brexit. And all of this, as it emerges, will certainly help the sector to understand how best it can leverage that talent pool.
What about the Mayor of London's office? I mean, Faisal Khan has said that he might just be looking at a City of London kind of a passport, right? Where everything would be status quo, nothing would change. Are you guys getting involved in that in any manner? Is your membership voicing or lobbying for something like this?
Certainly, it's positive signals. It's not something that we've actively been involved in or lobbied on, but it's an interesting concept, and it will be interesting to see how that plays out and whether something like that emerges. I certainly think the membership would be hugely supportive of that. But we're not just London-centric. We support members all across the UK in various regional hubs across Leeds, Manchester, Edinburgh. So just having a London passport might not necessarily be enough for the fintech sector, but it would certainly help.
What's the best case scenario?
I think the best case scenario is that London goes from strength to strength, that the fundamentals of the ecosystem in the UK remain strong, and that would mean that the talent base remains strong in the UK, the investment appetite for UK companies remains strong, and that the regulator and the FCA remains as proactive as they've been over the last few years in enacting regulations favourable to fintech.
But invariably, there has to be a compromise, right? So do you think that the British government will have a compromise with the Eurozone?
Again, I think I want to steer clear of these kind of questions. I think that they're getting slightly too political for one, my expertise, and two, us as an organisation.
Okay, that's fair enough. Financing in the coming months for the remainder of 2017, what do you predict?
I think we're going to have a good year in the UK. I think we've already seen in July a number of big deals in the UK. Revolut's raised $66 million, Receipt Bank's raised $50 million, to name just a couple. I think globally what we're going to see is a decline on last year, and that's primarily down to the big mega rounds that we had in China. So there was Alipay, Ant Financial, Lufax, and JD Finance, which raised over $1 billion each. And I don't think we're going to see too many rounds of that size coming out of China. I think the feeling very much at the time in China was, or for Chinese companies, was that they were raising a bit of a war chest to take their operations outside of their home market. And I think we're starting to see that happen now. So Ant Financial has been pursuing MoneyGram. They've recently announced a JV with CIMBC for a mobile wallet in Malaysia. And Lufax has just announced that they're launching their platform, their PFM platform in Singapore as well. So that's starting to happen. So I think we'll continue to see more of these large Chinese companies trying to enter other markets. For places like the US, I think the investment ecosystem is very strong. The US is in the lead position this year. It's recovered its lead position after China overtook it last year, and I think it will maintain that. Certainly the volume of deals happening in the US remains quite steady, and the volume of investment remains quite steady as well. I think what we're starting to see from a trend perspective is that whilst the number of deals is slightly declining, the actual investment volume going in is higher. And that for me is a signal of maturity for fintech generally, that we're starting to see more later stage rounds and more sizable companies.
There has been a second coming, if you will, in Europe, where now European countries like Germany, Spain, Portugal, the Netherlands, even some of the Nordic states are now basically have an equal shot of going in the lead as far as fintech and attracting talent is concerned. France, as you know, recently came out with the new president, came out with the new visa policy. Portugal is, doing some additional work in getting entrepreneurs to come over there and, start up their ops in Lisbon and so forth. Frankfurt wants to regain the crown. With all this happening, how is London preparing itself to counter such offenses by maybe perhaps introducing better policy with the looming threat of Brexit? How does London stay positive about the whole thing?
I think London's in a very unique position. There's very few places in the world where you have both a established financial services sector, a booming tech sector.
And sorry to just maybe complete this, and not just purely London, but the UK in general.
Yeah, I think, well, to answer the first part of that question, that London certainly is the preeminent centre for UK financial services and fintech. And as I was saying, that there's very few places in the world where you have a established financial services sector, a booming tech sector, the regulators, the policymakers, academia, the talent pool, all in a very short small geographical space, and that sort of melting pot is why London excels in financial services and fintech. That's very hard to replicate anywhere else in the world. In the US, if you look at the US, for example, the tech expertise tends to be on the West Coast, the financial services expertise on the East Coast, and the regulators in Washington. So the types of companies or the types of conversations you can have in the UK where you can be speaking to banks, fintechs, regulators all within the same day and just a short tube journey ride is very difficult for anyone else to replicate. So I think London has a natural protection when it comes to challenges from overseas, and that's really where the government has to focus. I think where London is at a disadvantage to places like the US is really on what we call the funding escalator. So at a certain point, if you're a company that reaches Series A and beyond and is looking for a certain size of round of investment, really there's not many sources available to you in the UK, and that's where companies start looking overseas. So we're very pleased that the government is initiating a patient capital review, which is looking at how to incentivize longer-term focused capital from, for example, pension funds into tech investment, and we think that will certainly help the UK long-term.
Is there anything that comes to mind or pops up in mind, something that London is doing that is absolutely stellar? A particular example?
Do you mean from a vertical perspective or a policy perspective?
Vertical.
So I think I'll answer the question more from a sort of a UK perspective. I think the fact that we have a number of challenger banks that have been authorized in the last few years, and they are raising sizable rounds of investment, I think that's hugely encouraging for what we're going to see moving forward. We have the Open Bank Initiative coming in next year, which will really open up that retail banking space. And we're already starting to see the challenger banks really position themselves with more customer-centric offerings. So, for example, we've seen Feeder in the UK launch in the UK and have partnered with Nutmeg and Cedars. So really building out their marketplace with other fintech offerings. We've seen Bud aggregating peer-to-peer services with the likes of Zopa and RateSetter. So I think this sort of move towards challenger banks and marketplace is an interesting development in the UK, and that will certainly change the retail banking landscape.
I agree. I think challenger bank is purely a UK phenomenon that just spread out worldwide. On a government level, when they see your trade body, which is Innovate Finance, how many other trade bodies are there that are representing the various fintech or quasi-fintech sectors?
So none dedicated to fintech, but there are obviously other trade bodies that represent tech and financial services, and we work quite closely with all of them on various initiatives where there is overlap between fintech and tech or fintech and financial services.
So, on your Innovate Finance, let's just talk a few minutes about that. Other than this global summit that you do, is that the right word? The global summit.
The global summit, yes.
What else do you do throughout the year?
So as I mentioned, we have 300 members, approximately a 1-to-5 ratio in one financial institution to 5 startups at various stages of growth, and we do a number of programs. So for the institutions, we do a more curated program focused around their innovation challenges. So that could be anything from, for example, with large banks, we'll run hackathons in collaboration with them. We'll do pitch competitions. We'll run curated introductions for them in certain verticals that they're interested in, where they can get to know some of the fintechs in that space, or really look at thematic problems where they're trying to address certain things within the bank for their customers, and I try and identify with them collaboratively fintechs that could solve that challenge and make those introductions. For the startups, we're running something called a FinTech Growth Forum in September, which is really looking at the areas that they need to focus on through their growth journey. So focused around capital, talent, and scaling. And that really is a day curated for startups where a number of professional service providers and advisors are coming in and running sessions focused on helping those companies to scale. And beyond that, we run thematic working groups, which is a chance for institutions and startups to come together to talk about all sorts of things, anything from cyber, cap markets, alternative finance, to just name a few.
Is Innovate Finance going to be using it itself as a template and go out into other territories?
So we're certainly supportive of other territories. Whilst we're UK centric, we've seen a number of bodies emerge across the world, and rather than take our formula overseas, what we've done is we've launched in collaboration with Inner Tribe at Swift something called the Global Fintech. I'll say that again. Something called the Global Fintech Hubs Federation. And that really is an opportunity and a platform for associations, economic development bodies, accelerators, anyone who's working towards the advancement of fintech in a jurisdiction to come together and knowledge share on a global level. And that currently has 66 members, which represent 40 jurisdictions. And it's run collaboratively between Innovate Finance and Inner Tribe at the moment.
So Abdul, for a startup that wants to become a member of Innovate Finance, how do they join? What are the fees? What's the procedure like?
So it's very easy to join Innovate Finance. Please get in touch with our membership team. You can email them at connect@innovatefinance.com. And the membership fees for startups is £1,000 a year.
Okay, very cool. Are you hiring by any chance?
We tend to expand our team from time to time. At the moment, we don't have any open roles, but every 6 months or so, we review our team and see where we need to grow as an organisation. And we do tend to hire from time to time, but no open roles at the moment.
Very cool. Anything you want to add, sir? It's been a pleasure having you here today.
No, really pleased to have been on the show. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to speaking to you again.
And for the conference next year, can you just give us a 2-minute rundown of where the conference is going to be held, how people can get, invites or the opportunity to speak, etc.?
Absolutely. So the conference is going to be held in London on the 19th and 20th of March next year. It'll be at the Guildhall, which is in the city. Tickets are available now. You can go to ifgs2018.com to secure your ticket. If you want to become a member of Innovate Finance and exhibit, if you want to sponsor the event, if you want to speak at the event, you can find details of how to declare your interest on that site as well.
Mr. Abdul Haseeb Basit, Co-Founder of Innovate Finance, thank you very much for taking the time out to talk to us today. Hopefully we'll speak somewhere down the line, and definitely we will cross our paths with the Innovate Finance Global Summit next year in London.
Thanks for having me.